Chapter 1. The Calm Before the Storm. The Eruption of Mount Tambora, 1815. The year 1815 began in peace. In the Dutch East Indies, life flowed gently beneath the shadow of Mount Tambora. Villagers worked in the fields. Palm trees swayed with the wind, and the air smelled of smoke and ripe fruit. Few noticed the faint trembling beneath their feet. Strange noises began to echo from the mountain, low rumbles like distant thunder. Birds flew away in flocks, and the air grew heavy with the smell of sulfur. Yet most villagers dismissed it as the spirit of the mountain clearing its throat. On April 5th, 1815, the mountain roared to life. A deafening explosion shook the island. Columns of ash burst into the sky, climbing higher than the clouds. The earth split open, swallowing forests and rivers in flame. Day turned to night. The sun disappeared behind a curtain of ash. Rivers of lava carved glowing scars down the mountain slopes, and the air filled with the cries of people and animals running for their lives. Huts caught fire. Palm trees fell like torches. Mothers clutched children while men shouted prayers into the roaring dark. The once living village became a hell of smoke, fire, and despair. For 2 days, the sky stayed black. Lightning flickered through the clouds. Ash fell like snow, coating the sea and land alike. Those who survived could not tell if it was day or night anymore. The explosion was heard more than 1,000 miles away. Ships at sea felt the air shake. The British in Batavia thought it was cannon fire. The sound of Tambora's wrath circled the world. When the mountain finally fell quiet, everything else was gone. Villages were buried, rivers choked with mud. The land that once fed thousands was dead. Tambora had destroyed itself and everything around it. But Tambora's fury did not end there. The ash rose higher, spreading across the atmosphere. Winds carried it westward, toward India, Africa, Europe, and beyond. The sky itself was poisoned. Tens of thousands perished. Entire kingdoms disappeared overnight. The island that once flourished with laughter became a graveyard of dust and silence. In the following weeks, sunsets turned red and strange. The air glowed like fire even after dusk. Sailors spoke of a sun that looked wounded and a moon that rose pale and sickly. As the ash circled the globe, the world began to cool. Crops withered, rain patterns changed, but no one yet understood the connection between a faraway volcano and their dying fields. The year without a summer had begun. What had started on a remote island would soon reach every village, every ocean, every life on Earth. In Sumbawa, survivors gathered on blackened shores, praying over the ashes of their families. The smell of sulfur and death hung in the air. The world was mourning, but the sky showed no mercy. News reached the Dutch colonial authorities. They sent reports of the greatest eruption in living memory. No one yet realized that this event would plunge the entire planet into shadow. Ash blanketed the seas. Mariners found their ships coated with dust. Compasses spun uselessly. The stars were gone. They navigated through a world without direction. When rescue parties finally arrived at Tambora, they found nothing but silence. Forests gone, villages erased, an entire culture vanished overnight. Where a mountain once stood, there was now a vast hollow, 7 miles wide, a wound in the earth itself. It was as if the planet had exhaled its soul. The ash cloud rose 30 miles into the heavens. Carried by stratospheric winds, it would darken the world for years to come. Tambora's breath have reached the stars. And thus, the calm world of 1815 ended, not with silence, but with a roar that would echo through generations. The volcano had spoken, and the earth would never be the same again. Chapter 2. Europe falls into winter. In the months following the eruption of Mount Tambora, strange changes began to sweep across the skies of Europe. The sunsets turned blood red, and a ghostly haze lingered even at noon. Farmers whispered of omens, priests prayed, and scientists puzzled. By the spring of 1816, the weather refused to follow its usual rhythm. The snows lingered long past their time, rivers froze again after thawing, and green buds withered before they could bloom. Across France, Germany, and Switzerland, the people grew anxious. They called it the strange year. Crops failed to sprout, and livestock starved for lack of pasture. In England, rain fell without end. The skies were thick with clouds, and sunlight became a rare visitor. Mud roads turned to rivers, wagons sank, villages drowned in endless drizzle. The people began to call it the year without a summer. June brought frost instead of flowers, and July brought snow. The earth itself seemed to have forgotten warmth. In France, the vineyards were lost. Grapes turned black and shriveled before harvest. Wine barrels stood empty. Taverns grew silent. In Switzerland, the Great Lakes froze along their edges. Boats lay stranded in ice, and fishermen stared at the sky, waiting for a sun that would not come. In Ireland, cold rains ruined the potato harvest. Families huddled together inside cottages, their fields drowned, their hopes fading with the daylight. Bread prices soared. Wheat became gold. Riots broke out in the markets of London, Paris, and Vienna as hungry crowds demanded food. Mothers carried hungry children to churches, begging priests for help. Bells rang not for weddings or births, but for funerals and famine prayers. The weather grew even stranger. Orange snow fell in parts of Italy and Hungary. Red rain stained the fields of Poland. The sky seemed to be painted in madness. Cattle died by the thousands. The air smelled of decay and smoke from desperate fires kept burning day and night for warmth. In Paris, scientists debated. They spoke of sunspots, comets, and divine punishment, unaware that the cause lay half a world away in the ashes of Tambora. Artists and poets, trapped indoors by endless rain, began to dream darker dreams. Their imaginations twisted like the weather outside. In a villa near Lake Geneva, a gathering of artists found themselves caught in this eternal night. Among them was a young woman named Mary Shelley. As thunder rolled across the lake, she began to write a tale that would outlive the century, a story born of lightning and fear. Frankenstein. Beyond the villa, the Swiss mountains stood cloaked in mist, snow crawling lower each week, devouring villages that once bloomed with life. Travelers described the sun as a pale disk, dim and cold, a ghost of the life-giving star that once ruled the skies. Across Europe, famine, fear, and frost gripped the hearts of millions. The rhythm of nature had broken, and the world shivered in silence. None yet knew that the dark veil over their world was born from a distant mountain, a shroud of volcanic ash that had circled the earth. Chapter 3. Across the Oceans, the American Chill. While Europe froze beneath darkened skies, across the Atlantic, the young United States faced its own nightmare. The year 1816 dawned gray and silent, with a bitter wind blowing across New England. In May, snow began to fall. Farmers stood in disbelief as white flakes drifted down onto their newly planted corn. By June, frost had turned young crops to ice. The blossoms that promised fruit became brittle ghosts of themselves. In New York, lakes and rivers froze solid once more. People chipped ice from their wells to drink, while children stared in wonder at frozen summer ponds. In Vermont, snow fell in July. Men chopped firewood instead of hay. Women sewed blankets instead of tending gardens. The sky was dim and colorless, the sun veiled by a strange, dry haze that turned even noon into twilight. The price of grain soared. Wheat, oats, and corn became precious. Families bartered everything they owned just to survive the summer cold. In the towns of Massachusetts and Maine, the poor burned furniture for heat. Entire forests vanished into smoke. Birds migrated south too early, confused by endless winter. Fish died as lakes froze over again. Even the animals seemed to sense the world had gone mad. Travelers on horseback moved through a land of frost and famine. Inns were crowded with refugees searching for warmth and food. In Boston, ministers preached that the end of days had come. People gathered in churches, praying beneath flickering candlelight. In the Appalachian Mountains, families fled their farms. Frost-bitten fields lay abandoned, their fences broken and barns empty. The cold reached as far south as Virginia and the Carolinas. Frost-coated cotton plants, and farmers watched their livelihoods vanish overnight. In the West, settlers struggled against starvation. Game animals disappeared, and rivers ran low beneath the strange, dry sky. Many packed their wagons and moved southward, chasing rumors of warmer lands. Roads filled with endless lines of wagons and weary travelers. In the great cities, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, hunger riots broke out. Angry crowds stormed grain warehouses demanding bread. Merchants raised prices to survive. Farmers hoarded what little grain remained. Trust between neighbors began to crumble. From the northern forests to the southern coast, America trembled beneath a frozen sky. The young nation, barely 40 years old, faced a test of endurance it had never known. Letters from Europe brought no comfort. They spoke only of hunger, disease, and despair. The entire world seemed to shiver together. Yet even in the coldest corners, fires still burned. Hope flickered in the hearts of those who endured, waiting for the sun to return.
Chapter 4. The Darkness over Asia. Far from Europe and America, Asia bore the heaviest scars of Tambora's wrath. The very lands nearest the volcano became a graveyard of silence and ash. In the Dutch East Indies, the island of Sumbawa was nearly erased from the map. Entire kingdoms vanished beneath the gray blanket of ash. Survivors spoke of a world without sound. No birds, no wind, only the crackle of cooling rock and the whisper of the dying. In neighboring Java and Bali, the sky turned dark for days. The sun was a pale ember behind layers of ash. Crops failed across the islands. Rice paddies became pools of gray sludge. Coconut trees fell like matchsticks. Famine swept through the archipelago. Those who survived the eruption now faced hunger more terrible than fire. The seas around Indonesia turned dark with floating pumice. Fishermen's boats drifted helplessly, unable to find their way home. Thousands of miles away, the skies above China dimmed as the volcanic veil spread eastward. The Yangtze and Yellow rivers swelled and flooded. Torrential rains fell for weeks, drowning entire provinces. In Yunnan, summer never came. Snow fell where flowers once bloomed, and frost killed crops before they could be harvested. Famine struck China and Korea alike. Millions faced starvation. Markets stood empty. Temples overflowed with the desperate and dying. In Bengal and southern India, monsoon patterns shifted wildly. Floods followed by drought left farmlands cracked and broken. The mighty Ganges turned murky, swollen with disease and death. Villages vanished beneath its rising waters. In the Himalayan foothills, snowstorms buried villages that had never known such cold. From Burma to Vietnam, harvests failed. Rice shipments ceased. Traders and travelers carried tales of darkness and hunger. The ash that blotted out the sun reached Japan, where the air turned thick and dim, and the rains smelt of sulfur. In every corner of Asia, the rhythm of life faltered. Birds fell from the sky, rivers turned black, and the soil itself seemed cursed. Temples filled with prayers. Monks lit incense and chanted beneath gray skies, calling on heaven to restore balance. But the sky remained silent. The great volcano's breath still cloaked the world, and Asia trembled beneath its shadow. From the burning islands to the frozen steppes, one truth united all of Asia. The heavens had changed, and the earth no longer obeyed its seasons.
Chapter 5. The Silent Harvest, the Global Famine. By the spring of 1816, the world's farmers waited for the thaw that never came. Seeds rotted in the soil. Frost returned in June, biting through the last hopes of harvest. Across France, Germany, and England, wheat stalks never rose. The fields stood empty, silent as graves. In Switzerland, snow fell every month of the year. The alpine valleys became traps of ice and despair. In Ireland, endless rain drowned the potato fields. Mud replaced earth. Hunger replaced hope. Markets grew empty. Coins lost their meaning. Bread became treasure. Mothers traded heirlooms for handfuls of grain. Children cried themselves to sleep on empty stomachs. The wealthy retreated to their estates, hoarding grain behind iron gates as mobs gathered outside. In Germany, bread riots erupted. Bakers were beaten, granaries burned. In France, desperate families boiled roots and weeds. Even dogs and horses vanished from the streets. The famine crossed oceans. In North America, snow covered the cornfields of June. Cattle froze in their pastures. Farmers slaughtered them not for food, but mercy. The price of grain tripled. Entire towns abandoned their homes, seeking food in neighboring lands. Ships left Europe filled with the starving, only to meet hunger again in the New World. In India, drought turned to deluge and then to plague. The rivers overflowed with both life and death. Famine's reach knew no empire, no border. Even the mighty trembled before an invisible hand. From the Arctic Circle to the equator, a single sound echoed. The wind through empty granaries. The earth itself seemed to mourn. Animals migrated in confusion. Rivers reversed their course. And yet, even in ruin, humanity clung to faith. Churches filled with songs of grief and pleading. The harvest was silent, the granaries hollow, but history itself was watching. The storm that ended one age was beginning another.
Chapter 6. The Painters and the Poets, the Birth of Dark Romanticism. Amid the frozen fields and barren vineyards, a new movement stirred in the hearts of artists and poets. The gray skies and endless storms fueled imagination. Painters sought to capture the melancholy of a world gone awry. In Switzerland, poets gathered by the shores of Lake Geneva, watching the mountains swallowed in mist. Among them was Lord Byron, his cloak flapping in the wind, reciting verses inspired by the tempest and famine. Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley, confined indoors by rain, dared to imagine worlds of horror and wonder. Thunder rolled across the lake as Mary's pen moved furiously, shaping the tale of Frankenstein. Artists painted night skies glowing with unnatural colors, capturing the ash-laden sunsets and eerie clouds. In Paris, poets wrote laments of famine, exploring human sorrow and divine punishment. Music became darker, slower, reflecting the despair of frozen rivers and dying crops. Even children's games carried a haunting note,
as snow covered summer pastures and forests seemed endless and dark. From Germany to Italy, painters sketched famine, frost, and ruin, each stroke heavy with emotion. Nature itself became a muse. Lightning, ash clouds, and storms inspired images of grandeur and terror. Writers chronicled not just events, but feelings, fear, isolation, and awe before the power of the earth. Across Switzerland, artists painted reflections of themselves in candlelit interiors, capturing the isolation of the soul. Storms became characters in poems, frost and famine themes. Humanity, fragile yet persistent, formed the central narrative. Mary Shelley, in her visionary horror, imagined the consequences of ambition in a world already scarred by nature's fury. Dark romanticism emerged from fear, famine, and ash, a movement of human emotion as raw as the frozen earth outside. Candlelight flickered against walls, echoing the heartbeat of a world learning to endure, to create, to imagine. Though the harvest had failed and famine raged, the human spirit found refuge in expression, defiance, and story. From the coldest nights and darkest days, beauty arose, terrifying, haunting, eternal. Chapter 7. The volcano's echo. The global chill intensifies. By late 1816, the full impact of Tambora's eruption had reached every corner of the globe. Europe remained cold and wet. Crops continued to fail. Fields that had been planted lay in ruins. In the Alps, glaciers advanced slightly, swallowing pastures and mountain paths. North America's New England remained frozen far into June. Ice floated down rivers once filled with boats. In Asia, the ash-clouded sky darkened daily. Farmers plowed barren fields under ominous clouds. The famine was global. Grain prices soared, people starved, and desperation bred unrest. In India, monsoons turned violent. Rivers overflowed, sweeping away homes and livestock. Across China, frost returned even in July. Wheat and rice failed. Rivers froze in unnatural cold. Europe's forests fell silent. Birds disappeared. Wildlife dwindled. Even wolves and deer seemed to vanish. People abandoned villages, traveling long distances for food. Roads became rivers of despair. In Russia, winter returned early. Wheat fields lay under frost. Lakes froze again in June. Even in the tropics, life struggled. Animals perished, crops rotted, and rivers turned thick with ash. The Pacific Islands bore scars of both eruption and starvation. Survivors wandered in search of food. North America faced food riots. Cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and New York were tense with hunger. Europe's countryside echoed with grief. Children went hungry, parents despaired, and fires burned low in stone cottages. Ships carried starving passengers across oceans, seeking relief, only to find famine in distant lands. In Asia, temples overflowed with the sick and dying. Priests prayed for mercy, chanting beneath smoky skies. The ash-clouded sun barely warmed the earth. Shadows stretched long across barren fields. The world seemed united in suffering. From the Arctic to the equator, famine, frost, and despair reigned. Yet in this frozen, ash-filled world, humanity endured. Those who survived carried hope, however fragile, into the darkness.
Chapter 8. The Year Without a Summer in Art and Memory. The famine and frost of 1816 left marks that would last for generations, etched into both memory and art. Painters captured the strange skies, the orange sun behind ash clouds, and the barren fields. Poets and writers memorialized famine, storms, and despair, transforming suffering into enduring art. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein emerged as a symbol of human struggle against forces beyond control. Artists across Europe painted the cold summers, ruined crops, and frost-covered landscapes with haunting realism. From Switzerland to England, the mountains, rivers, and valleys reflected both beauty and terror. In France, rural life became the subject of both sorrow and remembrance, preserved in sketches and poems. The strange weather inspired a fascination with the sublime, the terrifying beauty of nature. Music mirrored the melancholy. Composers wrote pieces reflecting grief, loss, and longing. Stories of famine and frost spread, shaping folklore and collective memory across nations. The year without a summer entered history books, remembered not only for death and cold, but for resilience. Artists painted both despair and hope, frozen moments of humanity enduring nature's wrath. Even after the skies cleared, the memory of ash clouds and ruined harvests lingered. Children born during the cold summers grew up with tales of frost and famine. Monuments, paintings, and manuscripts immortalized the events, creating a bridge between history and memory. The volcanic eruption had reshaped not only the earth, but imagination itself. Writers, painters, and musicians continued to draw inspiration from 1816, shaping romanticism and cultural memory. Even centuries later, the year without a summer remains a story of the Earth's power and human endurance. The ash of Tambora became more than dust. It became a symbol of history, art, and imagination. From famine, frost, and fear, humanity created memory, haunting, beautiful, and eternal.